Welcome to episode 2 of Off the Chain. Today we speak with Boot about how he's found his place in Web3, where he sees the industry going, how people can make their own way into Web3, and how parallel skills in other industries and other roles can have relevance and give you your way into the space. Please, as always, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share this content so we can spread the message and help as many people as possible. Hope you enjoy. Cheers. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in again to Off the Chain. Today I am very lucky to have Boot join me. Thank you, mate.
No worries.
How you going today?
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, mate, thanks for coming in. We're just talking about Melbourne weather is not fun to travel in, so I appreciate you coming in person.
No worries. I'm glad to be down here and doing this in person in a different kind of format than usual.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely get into that. But you've been on the spaces and the clubhouses and all the rest of it, and for quite a while. So it's good to change things up every now and then.
Yeah, well, I've been on the Spaces bandwagon recently, which is doing NFTs fest stuff with Greg Oakford and Jameson. So that's been, I think we've done 5 weeks of that now, which has been like 2 hours on a Monday night for 5 weeks, which has been quite a lot. And we just did 2 spaces yesterday.
Yeah.
One with Zeneca in the day, and then obviously the other one at night. So it's been like a lot of work, but I think that it's trying to like pivot from doing that with my phone in my hand, where if I'm talking to you, I can just be like, oh wait, hold on, mute, and then I'll duck down to pick something up, to kind of being here now, camera, lights, in a much more formal setting. Yeah.
So mate, I'd just love to give people context when they're watching.
Yep.
I've been saying this a little bit. We really want to help people from a mainstream perspective understand the space, and like we can get into it a little bit for sure. But for those that haven't come across you across crypto Twitter or whatever, a bit of a background on yourself as much as you're happy to share, as far back as you're willing to go. Just so people understand where you've come from, and we can get into, I guess, what the recent history has been for you. Yeah,
so I guess I'll give a 2-year overview of what I've been doing in the space. So before I was in Web3, I was a product designer. So I was kind of working at a consultancy, and I had like time, because we're kind of dead with clients at the start of the year, the overlap between December, January kind of thing. So I was just like watching YouTube, and I saw a video with Rhett, with Mankind.
Yes.
And he was talking about NFTs and Beeple. And I was like, that looks interesting. So I checked it out, and I looked there like early January, and like I looked up like what is an NFT. I saw a YouTube video by Justin Khan as well, the guy who invented Twitch. And he was trying to sell his videos as an NFT. I'm like, oh, okay, so there's a few people in this. And then I looked it up, and then I saw Nifty Gateway. And so I'm like, okay, cool, let me check this out. So I went and had a look at it, and because I was already a Discord user from gaming, and they're like, join our Discord. So I was like, cool. So I
know how to do that.
Yeah. So there was no kind of barrier for me to enter the space, because from a tech perspective, like I already was like using the requisite tools. So I clicked in, saw, man, there's a lot of chatter going on here. Went to watch one of the live auctions, which was by an artist called Ted Chin, who actually became a friend of mine.
Right.
And so I saw it, and his work went up, it sold, and then in that 2-minute period of time, $500,000 was generated. And I was like, okay, there's something here, right?
When was this?
This was like that first drop that I watched. So I was talking in Nifty Gateway and looking at it for like a month or 2 before I I'm going to try and buy an NFT. Yeah. That particular drop, I think it might have been the end of Feb when that specific one took.
Last year?
Yeah. So 21. This is the first one that
before the massive bull run, I'm trying to give context, like that number.
Yeah.
Wasn't in the absolute hype of things.
No, but it was at the start of a Nifty Gateway hype, which was the start of the art hype, I think, right?
And off the back of a very nice crypto run as well, so people were stacked.
Correct, right. So when I saw that happen, I'm like, this is something that I better pay attention to. Yeah. I got in and started like really talking Nifty Gateway. I bought some NFTs, and then I kind of started the journey there, and come to 2 years later, having launched 2 projects myself, which both sold out, been on the end-to-end process from, I guess, like ideation to kind of sold out again with other people in more of an advisory capacity on like another, I want to say 3 or 4, and then advised, like when I say advised, like not just kind of like as per needed, right? Not like being the key advisor, but like generally like someone who comes in and steers the ship a little bit, probably on 7 or something like that. So I've been across a lot of projects in the space. Obviously, I'll tell the camera, but so I started working for West Coast NFT, which, for context, West Coast NFT are the smart contract dev studio who did some of the biggest projects in the space, like Doodles, MFers, Goda, but they've done a heap. They've done 33 or 37, I think, projects now, which is, to my knowledge...
It's a high number.
Yeah, but I think it's, to my knowledge, the most in the world.
I'd imagine so. From the single unit.
So I met those guys at the start of 21, before it was a company, ended up being an advisor with them, like strategic advisor, helping projects, like basically giving a founder's advice on what to do for projects, to going on to being a full-time salaried staff member with them running their launch division. So it's been quite a journey from I guess product designer to that, but I think there's overlap, which a lot of people take from their Web 2 work to Web 3.
100%.
There's tons of it. So I used to fade it, but now I'm really like, it's actually probably more important than the Web 3.
It's so important, yeah, for sure. And that's like, it's one of the reasons why, other than, we've gotten along for quite a while. I think the first time we came across each other was, I feel like it was a Clubhouse.
Possibly.
I really do, because it was definitely you and Greg. I'm not sure if Jameson was there, but Mark and I came across you guys. I'm pretty sure it was a Clubhouse session. But aside from the fact that we've been catching up and chatting for quite a while, the perspective from your side, like we've had artists on here and different people from different walks of life. So giving people perspective in terms of how they can be involved in the space, whether it's working in the space, participating as a consumer, as an artist, as a creator, etc. It's great to have this perspective from someone who has relevant skills in, let's call it Web 2, in what they know and what they've sharpened their tools on for quite a while, being able to, I guess, identify what those skill sets are that apply to Web3 and then giving it a go. It's all about giving it a go, right? So
basically,
you mentioned the thing that really pricked my ears, and something that we spoke about with when we had Giant Swan on the show, is the relationships that can be formed without galleries or any middle people in the way between creators and artists and the end user.
So basically, that to me, that's the most interesting part, because in Web 2, if you're trying to position a network, it's mostly run through LinkedIn, and then you go to these events. But because everybody is kind of doing it, it's like you're a small fish in a massive sea, and there's tons of other fish. But in Web 3, it was kind of like there was not enough people around in the beginning to kind of like...
Supply and demand.
Basically, right? So the people that did Web 3 projects at the start were just the people that wanted to, right? And then, because it was such a small ecosystem, you're actually connecting with some super like people who are like really successful in their Web 2 careers. Like we're talking like, 8 figures net worth, and there's a bunch of these dudes, maybe even up, right? And all like super successful artists and stuff like that. And because you're all in a new space, no one was an expert, right? So you could come along and kind of just make these connections and start chatting with people in these communities. And then from there, that's where people broke off into their own little sub-communities. This is kind of before NFT Twitter. And then you kind of became friends. And then from that point, from becoming friends, you ended up doing projects, or you ended up, I guess, forming an alpha group, or you ended up becoming an influencer. So from those early days, I mean, a lot of the people that I started with, I remember like those guys now have like 100K audiences and things like that. Even like for reference, like Richard is just in like, I'm still have a very small chat of like 10 people, which Richard, who runs Manifold, is part of, right? And like this is a guy that has, made, already was very successful. He used to run a crypto gambling company with some of the other founders from West Coast NFT, but who has, I guess, done, he's trying to be the Google of Web3 by releasing free products so that people can, I guess, have the tools to kind of produce, right? Kind of giving power back to the artists.
Removing the friction to enter the space.
And so I think that a lot of those conversations was so much easier to be had in the beginning because everybody was fresh. In the middle, it was hard, but right now it's also a great time as well, right?
I was going to say, as you were saying that before, I've seen a Twitter thread that that sparks conversation today. A bit of tongue in cheek in there as well, but certainly there's a lot of truth about it. The filtering out, I guess, of the noise.
Correct.
Provides a space that's very fertile for fostering relationships, building quality products, and just building up these networks that it almost does feel like when we were back there.
Correct.
That there's still the intrigue and the excitement, at least for me.
Yeah.
2 years later, it's still there because there's still all this new stuff happening, regardless of all the shit that's going on with FTX and everything. Aside from that, there's still new innovations that are popping up all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that the common theme is that people just need to drop their guard and just find people that they resonate with, whether it be artists or otherwise, through the different channels that are open to them, and just go for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if I was to give anyone advice entering the space now, it would be to just like build a presence on Twitter, right? Yeah. Just go on Twitter and start connecting with like people who are talking about NFT content. Like obviously that is easy to say and probably hard to find. So you need to find someone to kind of give you like a few
starting
pointers,
point,
right? A starting point of like maybe let's say 10 accounts. You follow them, you put notifications on from those 10 accounts, look who comments on there, and then kind of fan your way out. Yeah. So I would do that. I would personally buy an NFT just so you know the process of how to transact and use Ethereum and stuff like that. Oh, even Solana NFT, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. Use an NFT as your profile picture on Twitter. Start getting into the culture. And then from there, like don't think about wanting to work in Web3 at the start, even if you want to, but just put that at the back. Go, okay, before I start providing value, I'm going to learn. And I think that's
so important.
Yeah, the biggest thing, because it doesn't take. So I used to previously think that Web3 would be run by Web3 natives, but that was kind of like a hopium dream of that we had like we're gonna control the new narrative. We're gonna build this in the way that we want to. Everybody's gonna come to us. But actually, realistically, it's a merging of Web 2 and Web 3, right? So we're going to be getting people who are really skilled in Web 2 and people who are really skilled in Web 3. It's probably easier to be like, let's say, a product manager for like a really successful company to come in, buy an NFT and learn the culture than it is to own an NFT and become a successful product manager. So I think but that being said, there is a role to play for people to be the strategic advisors for corporations and be embedded in a corporate team or kind of form an agency that consults with that, right? That's a requisite, right? So, but I guess that's looking at one end of the spectrum. If you're just brand new and wanting to contribute to Web3 and learn about Web3 and bring maybe, I don't know, some sort of skill set that you've got, maybe you're a creative copywriter, maybe you just want to get involved in the community thing and mod Discords and stuff like that, you got to learn first. You got to participate.
It's paying respect to the space, right? It's almost like you wouldn't go into the automotive business and start building cars until you actually learnt about how the industry worked.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. You wouldn't go into a new technology space without understanding the way that and this is even more intricate because of the cultural aspect of it. The bullshit filter, I guess, that people have is pretty on point.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty easy to see, who has come in and taken a little bit of time to actually embed themselves within the ecosystem versus someone thinks they can come in and just buy their way in.
Yeah, and look, there's two parts to that. I have seen people come in and buy the way in, right? Because they come in. There's a lot of people like from Web 2 who are pretty successful who come in and just buy a mutant, and then like that's their new profile, and then they kind of like are like wag me, and then you're like, okay, like all right, like they're kind of getting it, but they're trying to purchase their way in. There's other people who have really earned their way up, and then like, I think people kind of see them and think that they're almost subject matter experts, but it's more like, okay, no one is almost a subject matter expert. A lot of people have this kind of like good level of understanding of what Web3 is, but Web3 is not like this, like just one thing. It's not, I guess, a monolith. It's like there's tons of different aspects to Web3. So maybe this Web 2 guy here with the mutant who's saying wag me, it's like, okay, this guy, he doesn't get the culture, he's trying to buy his way in, but maybe he's really good at running a project, right? Maybe he's a PM, right? maybe this guy over here who's the influencer who you think knows everything about a project, like from personal experience, I'm not going to say who, but those guys sometimes don't really know how to run a project. They don't really have the requisite Web 2 skills. So it's like the merging of those two groups of people is super important. I think that this guy over here can provide really good insights. This guy over here can provide really good insights. So kind of like, if you're entering, you need to find your niche.
Totally.
And then like, where are you going to provide value and how?
Yeah.
It's kind of an amorphous thing to say because like, what is value? But I think just having a conversation and chipping in on the culture side of things, and then maybe being like, hey, look, I'm a UX designer.
Exactly.
And I think that...
Perspective. People like to hear people's opinions and perspectives on things.
Well, it's valuable because it's actually saying... If you go on Twitter and you read 50 tweets about FTX, you're going to learn a lot about FTX, but that 50th person tweeting is not adding any more value, right? After about 3 tweets, it's the same shit. But if you go in and you're like, okay, I'm going to look at why MetaMask is not effective from a UX perspective or a UI perspective, and I'm going to write an article or I'm going to write some tweets. It's going to go on LinkedIn, it's going on Twitter. I might do a short form, kind of like YouTube short or TikTok or something like that. That's actually valuable because like a company can see that and be like, oh, we're actually looking at building a native wallet app and we need a UX expert from Web3 to come in. And if you already have a background somewhere else, then it's easy to kind of cross over there.
Yeah, or you might be a content creator and that's you showing you can create content like we are doing right now. And that's value as well.
Yeah.
It's so subjective. It's you know, the skills that you're bringing to the space, there's definitely an element of self-awareness there that's super, super important.
Yeah.
But if you've got a cross-section of objective success from a feedback perspective with that skill that you're bringing to the space, and you know that you're passionate about it and you like it, then that's where you start, right? You can start to bring that flavor of opinion onto particular topics that are timely, or even, to your point, you know, different aspects of whether it's tools or the way that particular things that you've read up on seem to be working or heard on a series like this or a Twitter space or whatever it might be. You just start to find those circles of conversations, and that's the beautiful thing about some of these things like Twitter and Discord, etc. You can join into conversation with zero friction, and people will respond to you if it's valuable.
Yeah, and that's the participation economy of Web3. It's like,
absolutely,
you don't need to be like a 2-year veteran of NFTs to talk about NFTs.
Yep.
You can bring your new take to it. You can kind of be like, okay, from your perspective, like, this is what I see NFTs in the music scene being like. From my experience and my expertise, this is where I see how the industry can position itself to be successful there, right? And that's your particular Web3 journey. Mine is going to be like, okay, from a project perspective, this is what I think teams can be doing. This is what I think maybe an agency could be doing in terms of staffing or whatever, or looking for projects or working for partners and stuff like that. So like, I'm probably doing something completely different to what you're doing.
Yes.
But we overlap in terms of what's going on. I think probably the one binding thing is like, again, like just to tell anyone watching is, again, Twitter. Twitter is the public square of NFTs and Web3. Get on that. There is like a growing movement on LinkedIn, but I find that it's a bit disconnected. I've been on some really good LinkedIn spaces, and I've been on some other LinkedIn spaces. And this, I'm not talking about the hosts. The hosts are always great, but the people who are talking on those had been positioned as experts, but you could tell that they weren't.
Yes.
And again, I'm not fading them because it's them providing their own 2 cents on what they think the industry is, but I think that there's a better caliber of educational content available on Twitter and elsewhere.
The strike rate is higher.
Yeah. It's like, and stuff like Zen Academy. It's like, you know, if you want to go for educational content versus like someone putting their LinkedIn threads up. I think it's not going to always be like that. LinkedIn is a platform that has value for a lot of other things.
Absolutely.
It's eventually going to get there, but they're slower to adopt. It's just different forms of content.
It's where our people, you know, the Web3 community has used Twitter as the platform to converse. And it just so happens that the people that are spending the most time in the space are also spending the most time conversing on that platform.
That's right.
There's definitely, you know, I'm going to think of probably a dozen people that are putting substantial time into LinkedIn, including myself, where you can find some quality there. I haven't been on any. I probably spent maybe 2 minutes on like an audio space on LinkedIn, but I've heard similar to what you're saying from like a mix of people perspective. So obviously being selective as a host of who you're bringing on to speak, and then obviously, as you know, it's anyone can jump up and give their opinion. So often that can't be, I guess, policed or filtered. But I think you're right. There's, the purpose that each platform plays. Obviously, it has its own role, but it's just Twitter's just that far ahead in that regard. So So in terms of I think that's like pretty clear. I think we've given the audience a couple of nice little bits around how someone with particular skills, or at least once they've identified what they might be able to bring to the table, could go about. We've listed a number of ways how they could start to build network, start to try things, etc. You mentioned Manifold. For creators or even entrepreneurs who want to go in, and we can talk about what you guys did with that Australian movement that you minted. That might be a good example. You might have others where people who want to dip their toe in from a creation perspective to try and test things. How what do you reckon is the sort of the best way for them to go about that to set things off?
There's never been a better time than now, right? So if you look at last year, a lot of the people that did projects were the ones that had access to devs, right? I was very lucky in that I was friends with the guys who were starting West Coast and able to get the developer work from them by virtue of being friends with some other artists that they kind of knew as well. This is so I helped, I was part of a team on their very first project with an artist that was kind of putting out a very basic, simple ERC 721, very bare bones contract, not even no minting portal, kind of just used OpenSea, right? So their first kind of contract. So back then, it was hard. If you're an artist, unless you knew devs, it was super hard. You could use OpenSea's self-publishing function, but that's called lazy minting, which is probably complicated to go into. But basically, if you're an artist, don't rush to produce. Try and do it properly. The way to do it really is to use an actual proper smart contract, right? So Manifold Studios has kind of done this in a kind of a turnkey way where you can be an artist, you go in, you basically just connect with with MetaMask, you go through a series of prompts, it basically publishes the contract for you and then uploads the art or pins the art to Arweave, and then you've got an NFT, right? So without going into the technical side of how that works, that's a proper contract versus OpenSea, which will just be basically, it's mirroring what a contract looks like. And although both technically, visually,
serve the purpose,
they serve the purpose, but the lazy mint function is if you want to actually have a true NFT and you want to actually, because it's a token, right? Token gating is basically what NFTs are for. To you have a token, it has not necessarily, but it's one of the avenues of using an NFT. And that's really hard with a lazy mint, whereas something like Manifold, it's a true NFT and you can do everything that you could with an NFT. So if you're a new artist, now you don't need to find a dev. You can use this free studio and it publishes something for you. It also has its own minting portal, a front end, which you can slightly customize, and then people can go in and click and mint, right? So it's not, you don't need to go to OpenSea. You don't need to mint from the contract or do anything complex. So from a creative standpoint, it's never been more easy to kind of get going. And also, I think that there's such a template of information now to see what did successful creators do over the last 2 years to become successful, and look at that. Whereas before it was kind of maybe this will work.
You got data points, yeah.
And it's so I think that previously it was you got a machete and you're kind of cutting through the jungle and being we're just going to guess on which way to go. But now it's you can see clear paths of which people have tracked, and I think now we're kind of positioning much more into the days of NFT media, which is kind of a new meta and stuff like that. But if I was a creator and entering this space right now, I'd probably go, okay, who are the capital A artists, not projects, capital A artists in the space who have done projects, and then maybe ask how they did their project. I'm going to say, if they're an artist, they probably had Manifold, not Manifold Studios, but Manifold do their contract for them if they're top tier, because that's what Manifold does. Find out how they did it, look at how they became successful, and kind of try and mirror that. It's more about building a brand presence and building a brand up in the space and then launching a token into that versus going, I want to put a project out and be like, oh, and just making it and then being like, why aren't people buying it? It's because like you have no demand, right?
Yeah.
So like at least let people know what you're doing. Like don't be afraid to reach out. Maybe start, I guess it really depends on what artist you are, but like putting content out for free, building in public is a really strong way to do it.
Yeah.
Grow a following first and try and like onboard people to your work by showing them and talking about it and then selling it, which I think is kind of a skewed thing where people go, oh, well, I want to sell my work first. It's like, yeah, okay, you could have got that way with that a year ago, but now people don't want to spend any money on art at all. So
no, there's definitely an interesting point, but there's obviously an argument there that, you know, I guess this comes back to how you value, I guess, a Genesis piece, but there's also the point around minting your art as you're creating it, whether you charge for it or not, to have that proof that you created it at this point, and obviously use it. That's what a big part of, you know, NFTs and the consumer blockchain is around authenticity of when it was created and anything else that you sort of put into that, I guess, flag in the ground.
Yeah.
But to your point, like you're talking about sort of, I guess, more like scaling and sort of putting yourself out there and saying, hey, this is my collection.
Yeah.
Go and buy it, as opposed to, you know, making sure that you've got that supply before,
Yeah.
you've got the demand before you go out and put a collection out and try and sell it.
Yeah, I guess my perspective is doing it as a successful business model, right?
Yeah,
but that's not necessarily, that's my skewed way of thinking about it. Whereas if you're an artist and you just want to get your work out there, then go nuts. Like utilize the tools, like leverage all this free stuff to create your NFT, and then you can prove that you're part of a movement, or you prove that you've got an NFT on the blockchain and whatever, right? Mm-hmm. The tools exist. You don't necessarily need a following to do it. You can go and create now. If you want to make money, that's a separate question, and there's a whole other side to it as well. But I think that there's no harm in creating. The only thing I've advised people against before is like, if you do want to like try and sell some work, I'm not talking about being super successful, but still sell it. Think about the frequency in which you're releasing it, like not to oversaturate the market, and don't lead with your best piece. Because a lot of these artists over the last 2 years, they went on to like sites like Foundation, or they're not super rare, but Foundation is where anyone can kind of start. And they put like their best work up first, and like that kind of sold. And then you see some of them become like super popular later, and like they're like,
they can't keep it up.
Yeah, because like they've already put their best works out, and it's like this stuff starts to lag, and then they have to keep creating, and they get stuck in this cycle.
Interesting.
And even stuff like they could have probably sold their best work for like way more money. You know, maybe they sold it for like $50 or something, and then like I've personally purchased like art from Alpha Centauri Kid, who's like a big artist in the space, and I bought all of these Tezos pieces that he had for like 1 cent. And he recently sold 2 NFTs in 2 days for $200 each.
Wow.
Right? So, you know, he's suddenly making $400 ETH, which is like $800,000 in 24 hours or
That's
48 hours or something. So it's like, and he wasn't obviously leading with his best work, but like that's a cautionary tale to kind of like, oh, I guess it's not really cautionary. It's like if you support someone, you could end up like selling his NFTs and things down the line. But like, you know, like how do you...
It's interesting though, it's like best is subjective. So it's hard to... It's hard, like obviously there's a way that artist would feel, or if they've shown that art in public, obviously getting feedback around what sort of energy that creates, if they sort of have sneak peeks, etc. That one's definitely a tough one, but definitely there is a strategy there that people need to think about from a release schedule perspective. And definitely supply and demand is, well, it's part of what's brought the whole thing down, right?
And so I mean, I remember I talked to artists in the like when NFTs were kicking off, and some of my artist friends, and they were like, this is too complicated because I just want to make art. I don't want to manage a brand. I don't want to run social media. And that is part of it. Whereas the best artists were not necessarily, you know, the best artists. They were the ones that could manage all of those kind of facets together and understood like basic economics and supply and demand and creating FOMO.
Or had a good team around that allowed them to just build the art and guided them, you know, someone like yourself or a business manager, whatever it might be. And had they had some of them equal one superstar.
Yeah, there's a good example of that, Young and Sick. Okay. They're kind of like a team where one guy makes the music, one guy makes the art, and then kind of like they have people behind them doing social media and that stuff. So
great.
I wouldn't say they're super like mainstream, but like that's an approach you could take, is like leverage the strength of other people in the space to build the to fill the capacity shortfalls that you personally have, because otherwise it's kind of like a stressful endeavor. Social media and brand building is not for everybody. I personally fucking hate it, but like it's useful. But then other people, like, it's just like they're naturals at it, right? They really love doing it. They love crafting a tweet. Like, I was talking to Clout and he has 5,000 tweet drafted, like, and I'm like, that's insane. Wow. But he likes doing that stuff and like writing it, and building a following.
Strengths.
Yeah.
Play to your strengths, absolutely. No, that's cool, man. It's there's so many avenues that people can take, and I think that, you know, it's so exciting that these tools are coming out, removing or at least lowering significantly the barrier to entries and the friction, which is so important. And I'm talking a lot about, you know, the importance of what some of these brands like Nike, Meta, Starbucks are doing, where people don't need to know the infrastructure behind the advertising algorithm of Meta. They just need to know, as a business or as a solo entrepreneur, they can put ads on these platforms and they can either learn how to do it or they can use an agency. They don't need to know the backbones. And it's the same thing here. People don't need to understand at a deep level or at all that they're interacting with the blockchain. They just need to understand the benefits of engaging with this sort of campaign or brand or initiative or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's unimportant to your business model to know that you're interacting with the blockchain, right? That's just a tool. And it's like I mean, at someone's job is to be like, okay, I don't want to be a layer 1, I want to be a layer 2 on Polygon because that's cheaper and we save money and there's less friction points, right? That's probably as far as the importance of that conversation goes, but it is still important.
Internally, absolutely.
Yeah, but at the upper level, from brand level, you only care if you're successful. And so you want to kind of like, I guess, talk to people who can advise you and guide you in that direction. If you don't have an in-house team to kind of do it for you, and I saw a lot of mistakes with brands kind of do this, like where they were originally launching on layer 2s, not because like the layer 2 was going to be cheaper for like launching a massive, well, I guess that's part of it, but like they had brands to kind of grow a kind of huge product line on with NFTs, and they started on layer 2, but all of the market traffic was on layer 1s. Whereas then you've got companies that specifically entered into layer 2s because they knew that layer 2 is cheaper tech, right? Polygon is cheaper tech. So the Starbucks reward program, I'm trying to think, Nike's done Polygon as well.
Meta.
Reddit was Polygon as well, I think.
Sure.
So if you start I think that the future now of the space is really specifically going to be layer 2s as the kind of like economy layer, and layer 1 is kind of like maybe just the art layer. I have no idea.
Quick 30-second summary for those who are really, really new, that between layer 1, layer 2 from like a layman's term perspective.
Yeah, so it's kind of, I'm like not across it as much, but so layer 2 is like a bundled version of the Ethereum blockchain. So layer 1.
I guess if you go and Google what gas is, and the cost of running a business on a particular blockchain, have a look at Ethereum, what's involved from a transaction process.
Correct, yeah.
And that's referred to as layer 1. And then layer 2 is how you were explaining it, but essentially the benefits of it are
cheaper.
It's cheaper from a consumer perspective. So if you go out and put millions of tokens out, which is what these companies are doing, Nike, Starbucks, Reddit, etc., the cost for the business and also therefore passed on to the consumer is much, much lower.
Yeah, it's a scaling solution. So every function on the blockchain costs cash, right? It's going to cost you a percentage, right? Layer 1 is way more expensive than layer 2. Layer 2 basically goes, okay, people have clicked 100 times. There's 100 transactions ready to go through. Each one of those transactions costs $1. Yeah. But instead of each paying $1 each, we're going to bundle it into one transaction that costs $1. Got it. And if you're building a brand, like let's say you're doing a model, like you're a gaming studio and you want to release skins, right? Or your Starbucks doing like rewards for customer per transaction. Yes. You kind of want to bundle that and make it cheaper because that's less friction in terms of the cost. Like it's not cost feasible to kind of do it on a layer 1. So that's probably the only thing people need to know is like layer 2 is cheaper and it scales better. Layer 1 is just kind of like the whole ecosystem, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a good summary. We don't, in terms of people learning
It's complicated,
Yeah, we're not going to solve the world's problems on these types of content series, but certainly it could pique someone's interest to then go down the rabbit hole. And there's so much content out there from super smart people that have explained this sort of stuff really clearly. And it's certainly, to your point, unless you know, either getting advisors to help you consider these approaches, or you're learning it to a degree where you can make your own decisions yourself once you've been comfortable and you've done your 10,000 hours or whatever it ends up being from a research perspective. But it's definitely something that's can absolutely bring something down, or can absolutely be what allows something to be super successful, because it doesn't for many reasons.
From a risk perspective, if you think of it, if you're a corporation entering Web3, you have to understand the blockchain is immutable, right? So if you put a junk product out there based on bad advice at the start, and then you go, screw it, in 2 years' time, let's relaunch. That still exists. They can track it. They can look at it on chain and be like, okay, specifically, this is what you did. Like, it's you can't make it go away. So
because it's so new, not enough businesses would acknowledge that. Yes.
No, and so it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to build like a long-term brand play that's successful using blockchain, or you want to just make cash? If you just want to make cash quickly, probably hard to do now, but you could have just put something out and not think about the long-term consequences, like that Pepsi crap that went out, like that was a joke. Yeah. Or if you're looking at like a long-term brand play, I mean, it just makes no sense, because this stuff is staying and it's going to grow, and like in 10 years time, there's going to be like a completely different conversation, right? Totally. So like, if you start properly and go, okay, I'm looking at revenue over 10 years, I don't care about like making a couple of $1 million on day dot, then you're going to be much more positioned to build a brand in that ecosystem. And then I guess the ecosystems kind of cross over, and NFTs just become, or blockchain becomes a product line part of your company, versus, I want to make money today, we just got to sell this out at all. Like there's no like, we're not,
there's no vision.
Yeah, like there's no success metric other than selling out. So it's like, even if like bots buy it, we buy it ourselves, and Alpha Group pumps and dumps it, like they're like,
no one wins.
Yeah, well, you win because you make the cash, but like short-term win, right? Like,
but it'll blow back.
Yeah, because then people like brand A sucks. They don't understand where.
And who was tied to it?
Yeah,
how do they? And it's easy because they can trace it. They can sort of track it back.
It's like, if you like as well, like if you're an advisor and you advise them and they still do it as well, like then kind of your name is kind of dragged down by their failed product drop. And people look at that stuff, they go, okay, well, were you associated with that? Like why did that happen that way?
If you're associated with enough of them, they're connecting the dots, and people dedicate, as we've seen recent times, people dedicate a lot of time to finding that stuff out, because they're looking for clout themselves, right?
Well, it's to the stage where I think that like in the future it'd be quite easy to just like, there's probably going to be like a
directory.
Well, yeah, basically it'd be a minimum like thing to do is like, okay, who did this project? Like, who was dev studio? Like, who's still around who did this? Not like for a name and shame, but it's like, it's your resume in the space. And if you're connected,
and where did that wallet send crypto to?
Yeah, but if you're associated with successes in Web3, then that's a resume. Look, there's going to be successes and failures, because like the real world, 99% of stuff fails, right? So like,
that comes over here. We're not protected by it.
Yeah, but it's more the deliberate,
correct,
short-term thinking that put something out that failed to just make cash. And look, from an individual perspective, you'd probably be fine, but from a brand play, you can't. Like, you need to not risk it. You need to be like, okay, this is an ecosystem. We need a vision. We need a product roadmap. We need to think a decade ahead, and then play that out and build over time and iterate, versus just going, NFTs are cool. Let's put an NFT out, because that's going to make it.
Definitely. So what sort of projects are you looking for now to work with within your role?
Basically, I think we've made a pivot to we have made a pivot to corporate stuff. Okay. So, because I think the model of running a % share is really hard. It's a lot of risk. So upfront payments and things like that. And that's mainly coming from Web 2 money.
Yep.
That's just partly due to risk mitigation.
So from like a historical perspective, especially during the bull run, a lot of these advisory firms or consultancies would take a percentage off of the initial drop, which is called the mid.
Yeah.
And that number would be big enough to make it worth it now, where the collections are probably in almost every case smaller. You probably can't charge as much as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's case by case, but most of the time that's the case. It just doesn't fundamentally work from a business model perspective. We're talking about, sustainable business models here.
Yeah.
You've had to sort of pivot to adjust the times, where it's less about Doodles, for example, building a brand new brand, and because of the times, it was definitely feasible for something like a success story like that to go in and almost take a percentage share, whether it was just upfront or ongoing or what have you. Now, because of what's happening within the market, it makes a lot more sense to go more to a fee-for-service model within companies that are looking to better connect with their audience and their consumers and their customers, etc., by leveraging the Web3 consumer blockchain within their business is what you're sort of heading towards, right?
Yeah, and it's also like if I'm running a business and I'm like, okay, how do I pay for my staff's salary?
Yeah.
The percentage model in a bull run is fantastic because you think every percent is 100% of the percent. But in the bear market, you don't know if it's going to sell out. Maybe their team's not doing it properly. So you kind of go, okay, well, I need to mitigate risk here and take cash, and then therefore I can keep the lights on. And it's a bear market conversation. But you could still do a percent with certain things, but I think it's more of a mixed model at this stage.
Well, the risk ratio completely changes, right?
Correct.
And you need to take that out. It's completely understandable.
Yeah, but let's say, if you're working on Nike and Nike was like, oh, I want to give you a percent, I'd be like, yeah, sure.
Let's go.
Give me a cut of because it's guaranteed success basically.
Exactly.
But if it's more like a nuanced brand, like something that is kind of maybe not going to work as well. I won't specifically say the brand, but there's a wine company that was launching an NFT project.
Yep.
Good company,
Yep.
great company, but is there a demand for the NFT product line of that company? I just don't know.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're almost, that model, you essentially in an angel investor from a sweat equity perspective.
Correct.
So now the market's just so much riskier that it just doesn't make sense you're so much more selective that the majority of your projects are going to be fee for service.
Yeah, and that's where I think that if it's a tough time selling something, don't, right? So what can you do outside of selling? You can build the brand,
Totally.
You can create content,
Totally.
you can educate people, you can have these kind of conversations. It's not that I'm saying don't produce something if you need to as a company, but it's more like, okay, start thinking about what you can do before releasing the token, right? So if I was a brand coming into the space, probably I would put on I would pay for a, weekly presence in the space, right? Either on a show like this or on Twitter Spaces or in a LinkedIn Spaces, and not shilling the brand, just to
awareness.
And awareness and
just
sponsorship,
subtle,
basically. Do that, build up a presence, buy NFTs, get into the culture, build some foundation, and people will understand what you're doing. Build in public with what you're doing, and then you'll build momentum and a snowball. It's not as simple as just going, NFTs make money, let's make money. That can't happen anymore. It's not possible.
That's right.
So you need to kind of be like, what is the new meta? I'm pitching myself here partially because they're talking about shifting metas and actually I don't even know what my subject is. Shifting metas and Web3 something and shifting metas at NFT Fest.
Yes, your topic at NFT
I can look
Fest,
it up on my phone. Let me.
We can pin it at the bottom of the
Anyway,
of the description.
Whatever it is.
So Boot is one of the speakers at NFT Fest, speaking on a very similar topic, right?
Yeah, so I think I'm speaking with Clout and with Ada from Airtree. I'm pretty sure we're speaking on shifting metas. I forgot the other part of it, but basically, it's just looking at how NFTs can be successful into the future and what they can be doing. And I have a pretty kind of biased perspective. Not biased, I don't know, but my take on it is that you need to build a cultural play, right? You need to position yourself as being part of the movement.
You need to be relevant.
Yeah, so I think that this culture as a form of value outside products as a form of value.
Yeah.
Not every brand can fit this, by the way, but the strength I see is if you build a community and then put a token into it without trying to make the money now, long term that's going to be successful. If you can build, it's basically trying to build almost like a political movement, right?
Sure.
Like an ism.
The groundswell.
Yeah. And so you start doing all these things, like I think there's been some guys on Twitter Spaces doing this recently where they were putting tons of shows on there, really popular, and then you find out they're putting a project out and actually they're backed by a VC, but they've built a cultural movement and then they put the product into the cultural movement, right?
They've executed their marketing campaign perfectly.
And that is that is the way to market in Web3, I think specifically to NFT natives. The broader question of like what makes products successful in Web3 long term, I think is utility and actually removing friction points, because it's like, sure, utility is great, but if there's not enough users who can get involved with the tech, then even the great tool is not used enough and that doesn't go anywhere.
People put up things in the too hard basket really, really, really quickly these days. Attention span just continues to get shorter and shorter. So yeah, you can have the most amazing project, but if they can't get to it, whether it be a fiat credit card onboarding or a really easy explainer video, or you have such strong brand affinity that they'll do it. They'll sit through the pain and watch the video and actually learn because they love your brand so much. Mm-hmm. Then obviously, they're some of the ways that you can sort of get them on, but it's certainly, things to consider. Throughout the way.
I mean, the reason it's a shifting meta is because it's shifting, right? It's like stuff that worked 6 months ago is not working now. If me and you could hash this out of a project that would work today, that in 3 months' time, or even 1 month, would be a redundant kind of model, right? So it's this constantly evolving space whereby I guess people are becoming like more informed consumers and demanding more, and where I guess we're kind of mimicking Web 2 or like just the real world, right? Where it's like, okay, you're on a show, we're having this chat in person, talking about NFTs. This is media content, right? Content creation. Whereas before, there wasn't even a Twitter Spaces. There was just Twitter typing, and there was Discord, but people didn't even voice chat. So it's like the space is evolving, the media play is getting stronger, the educational play is becoming more relevant. Project like execution is becoming more complex. You're getting better quality like art, you're getting better quality brands entering the space. Sure, we're in like a bear market downturn, like in terms of crypto and I guess like liquidity entering the space, but we're at a point of like, I think, maturity in terms of demand, in terms of what people want to see.
And definitely at an institutional level as well. The players that we wanted to take notice are definitely not only taking notice, they're executing. Which is super important. Go back to how we started the show around, the romantic view of a decentralized world with just Web3 players that were early sort of, and collectively us being able to sort of control the destiny. At the end of the day, there needs to be enough players that bring new money to sustain any industry. Mm-hmm. So we need to have this, open mind around, wanting to welcome these participants as long as they're good actors and they're paying respect to, I guess, I mean, and it really applies to any industry, but, it goes back to what we were saying before around doing your research, being mindful of what the audience is looking for, and ticking all of those boxes that we were mentioning before, and certainly providing value is another one. Putting all of those things together will allow for a more fertile space and allow us to continue to, I guess, morph this space and changing metas and changing your approach in how you're marketing yourself or your brand or whatever it might be will allow you to continue to, I guess, be successful.
You need to be at the forefront of what's going on to stay relevant in the space. And it's not that like Web3 is completely different than Web2. It's just that Web3 moves way, way quicker, right? So you've got to think that it is a 24-hour space, right? Like, whereas...
Unfortunately,
and that's to the detriment of people working in it, but it's not like, it's international. I mean, international companies are technically 24-hour, but there's way more demand here and they're kind of smaller teams and kind of bigger expectations.
For sure.
So you need to constantly be kind of like paying attention to what's going on, which is kind of almost a full-time gig, but then also like executing on those decisions in real time and then understanding that it's going to be an outdated decision quite quickly. So it's more about, rather than following what other people have done, it's more like guessing what the future is going to be and throwing, I guess,
trialing things.
Yeah.
experimenting.
And people don't care if you do something that doesn't work out, as long as you're able to pivot and bring it forward. And this is why I think that the cultural play is really like a good one, because culture is just evolving, and you've just tokenized culture. You could even just tokenize content, because content constantly evolves as well. What the problem is when a company comes in and goes, okay, this token gives you access to this product or to this other ERC set, to a 20 token, which, coins, right?
Yep.
If you start pegging your NFT to those kind of things, people have really big expectations of what they're going to do. They're like, okay, the coin better make me rich. Okay, the product better be super great and attract a lot of interest and be really useful, right? And then you're like, oh, well, okay, how do I justify the high price of this NFT with this thing down here that's not doing those things that I expect? Okay, the price starts falling. It starts falling and falling. But if you have a cultural play, how do you position? How do you go? Okay, well, that NFT does not match the culture and price, because it's just.
It's like putting a value on the ROI of brand, right? It's similar. It's a similar comparison, I think. But I think in terms of, and I was having actually a conversation about this on a Twitter space this morning. It's not that the way we're operating needs to really change that much. And obviously we've already spoken about the parallels from the skill set from Web 2 to Web 3. It's more that now, and it might be because the space is so small, or because of the open nature and the expectation from a built-in public perspective, but the consumer definitely has whether it's a sense of entitlement or just an expectation of the way that the players that are offering in this space should behave from a providing value perspective, which you touched on already. Not just coming in and expecting to be able to sell something and drop it on people, and that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
People are expecting you to put time into engaging with the consumers and the people that you're essentially selling your offering to in the space, and it really just hones back on providing value first, being self-aware, whether it's at an individual level or a brand level, of what is it that you're bringing that people actually care about. And then getting that balance from a supply and demand perspective to make sure that people do actually care about what you've got to offer, and you're it goes back to value again, providing that value at
provide
that
value before you extract value, right? and that's what I think where a lot of people fail to kind of see the model. They're like, we have 10,000 NFTs. We're going to make this amount of money to go and do all this stuff with them. And you're like, okay, but like, no one cares, right? Like, just because you have mathematically worked out some budget structure.
No one cares about your forecast, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but then it's like, if you're all like, have been building in the space for a while, you're like, okay, we, based on time in the space, are making the assessment that this many NFTs could sell at this price, because we have already established that our brand is worth X in the space.
Done your research.
Or just live the experience of seeing the demand versus inventing the demand.
And you've built your community, and you know that there's hunger there, and there's attention.
And they'll tell you, they'll be like, that's too expensive. That's too many. Because they want to buy and support because they want to make money off you, or just like to basically bet on your future.
Exactly right.
And if you do something wrong, they'll tell you about it.
Yeah, no doubt. Mate, we've been going for quite a while. I'd like to finish up with something around, what do you personally, or with the business that you're involved with, what do the next 12 months or so look like? Obviously, we're in this bear market that who knows how long it's going to stick around for. People like us, you and I, are actually excited by this opportunity because of the fact that we can strengthen our relationships, build on things, test things, be ready for when, and chip away at bringing more people into the space, but definitely be ready for the next cycle that sort of goes off. So, how do you see then 2023 playing out for yourself and for everything you're involved with?
So I see it as much more quiet, which is good because I need a bit of a break. But I mean, personally, my goal for this year is to just build myself and what I'm involved in within the space, because I've been behind the scenes for a long time, not really projecting as much that I want to be in terms of a personal brand. So I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to basically try and get involved in as many things as possible without the profit as a metric, and just try and help other people build, I guess, dip my toes into content creation, not as a creator, but like maybe as part of a team who are doing things. I guess I've kind of sort of done that with Spaces, but yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely have, mate. That's I wouldn't discount that at all.
Yeah. Write more articles on NFT stuff.
Cool.
I guess upskill in other areas. So I've been like learning coding, like learning Python and stuff like that.
Nice one.
Probably go on a holiday for a couple of months as well, because it's feasible. But look, if at the end of the day, if I stopped making money in Web3 and I had to like go be a landscaper or something like that, I would still love it, because it's like, okay, I don't know, I'm using that example, I've never been a landscaper, but like, you know, for theoretical purposes, right? If you actually had to go and do something completely different to Web3, right? Yeah. You can still be involved in Web3 and be part of the community, because not everybody who's in the space is working full time in the space. So you just invest the time over the next 12 months to just build out the connections, build out a personal brand, build out a body of content, either this kind of content, written content, maybe you're creative copywriting for a project.
Play to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly. Doing whatever you are good at for the next 12 months. And then when things kick off, or when things evolve and change and shift and more liquidity comes in, or things mature and it becomes more stable, and the liquidity here, I don't know, like leaves a lot of people's hands and condenses in less hands, then you are positioned to be more successful. So personally, I'm taking that route of like removing dollars as a sign of like success, and putting it back on personal, growth, I guess, connection and
development.
Growth. Yeah.
No, definitely.
And yourself, that's the question back to your pitch.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, no, they're very, very much the same. So I have had a very busy year. I've got a Web2 agency that I'm still day in, day out.
Yeah.
So I've been doing ridiculous hours from a Web3 perspective, even if that was just my only thing that I'm doing. So I'm definitely working too much. So definitely a bit of break with family at some point. But just, doubling down on building on the community within what we're doing across our events and the NFT project that we've got coming out next year. And then, scaling this content far and wide. I've got incredible people that like yourself that have offered their time, and
thank you.
We'll continue to get this out until we don't feel like it anymore, which I don't think is going to happen, because I love creating content. I love discussing this stuff, and the amount of people that I've been able to call my friend and my acquaintance or done business with has been incredible. So I don't see anything in the near future where I'm not doing this.
Yeah. I think that's a great sentiment. I mean, it's about, money was one of the driving factors that people got involved in, but now I stay for the connections and the friends. I like have good friends with people in the NFT space. Yeah. And that's outside of us making cash or working. It's just like, we just talk about whatever, and it's fun, and everybody's kind of passionate about the space, and that makes you passionate, and you prop each other up, and I think that
feeds the brain and the soul as well.
Yeah, it does. And at the end of the day, like connectivity and bridging the gap between person to person is probably where I see just a benefit of doing anything in life. So if you can do that through Web3, and that becomes kind of the ethos for you, power to you. But
for sure, mate. Thanks so much for coming down.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate your time.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Let us know what you thought. We'll see you on the next one.
I really hope you've been enjoying Off the Chain so far. No matter how you're consuming this content, please leave your feedback either through the content platform itself, or find me on Twitter at offthechainweb3. Cheers for your support. Thanks a lot.